On December 26, 2022, a day after his team was thoroughly embarrassed on Christmas Day, the Denver Broncos relieved head coach Nathaniel Hackett of his duties just 15 games into his tenure with the team. Duties. It might have seemed quick, but that's not the fastest a first-year head coach has ever gotten the hook or taken the plunge. In fact, there are 5 coaches in NFL history who didn't even make it to their first offseason. We're gonna explain who they were, what they did wrong, and the pure dumpster fire of their endings. And all that is next. Lou Holtz. You probably know Lou from a long career in college football and television.
Well, I don't get the brain man cold,
But blink and you would have missed his short-lived tenure as head coach of the New York Jets. After a strong 4-year stretch at NC State in the mid-70s, the Jets poached Lou Holtz, bringing him up to the big leagues to coach a roster that included Joe Namath under center, an old Joe Namath. The Lou Holtz experiment lasted just 13 games in the Big Apple, featuring only 3 wins. Under Holtz, the Jets' offense was staggeringly inept, averaging just 12 points per game, while a thoroughly washed Joe Namath tossed 4 times more interceptions than touchdowns in a stat line that makes Nathan Peterman blush. When he finally resigned after 13 games, opting to become the head coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks, remember them for later, the head coach remarked that God did not put Lou Holtz on this earth to coach in the pros. He was right. God had molded Lou Holtz to coach Notre Dame to a national title in 1988 and blow it to Boston College in 1993. Holtz would actually receive a number of offers to return to the pros, but he humbly declined each time, knowing that his celestial calling was to ultimately unleash hot takes.
Hey, this is exactly what you need to do if you want to be a successful coach at Notre Dame.
Pete McCully. Pete McCully is best described as who he is not. Pete McCully is not the head coach that led the San Francisco 49ers to 3 Lombardis in the 80s, engineered the famous West Coast offense, and gave rise to the greatest passing duo the NFL has ever seen. No, Pete McCully was the guy before that guy. Prior to joining the 49ers in 1978, McCully had never ascended to a title greater than receivers coach, but San Francisco saw fit to make him their head coach, taking the reins for a team that featured just one superstar, the expired Juice, that would average just over 3.5 yards per carry in his penultimate NFL season. That means the one before last. As a former college quarterback, McCully's selling point was a strong passing game. Ironic because McCully's 2 quarterbacks, Steve DeBerg and Scott Bull, combined for just 9 touchdowns and 36 interceptions over the course of a 16-game season that felt like sitting through Morbius in the theaters.
I have to say, they're basically stabbing me in my gums, and it's still a better experience than watching that dog crap of a movie.
The Niners turned the ball over an incredible 63 times, by far the most in the NFL in 1978 and the second most in history. They found the end zone just 23 times. McCully, of course, didn't make it to the end of those 16 games. He barely made it through 9 games before the 49ers brass hit him with the axe, winning just a lone game in the process. When asked if he was surprised by his abrupt firing after a record 9 games, McCully said, "No, I haven't been surprised since I found out ice cream cones weren't filled all the way down to the bottom." Yeah, Pete McCully walked so Joe Judge could trip down an escalator. Bobby Petrino. It took another 3 whole decades to find a coach who failed to make it through a full season as a head coach. In fairness to Bobby Petrino, who left Louisville to become head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, he thought he was inheriting a favorable situation with Michael Vick at quarterback, until Vick left to be the starting QB for the Fort Leavenworth prison team for 2 years. They might have been able to turn to a potential franchise quarterback in Matt Shaw, but whoops, they had traded him to the Texans right before the season. Alright, that's all the fairness I have for Bobby Petrino, and I don't care that he was carting out Joey Harrington, Chris Redmond, and Byron Leftwich. The Falcons were equally inept on offense and defense, finishing 29th in scoring on both sides of the ball despite having 2 bright coordinators in Hugh Jackson and Mike Zimmer. Actually, can I walk that one back? After realizing he sucked liquid ass like the bathrooms at Fogo de Chao, Petrino became interested in the Arkansas job and knew that the only way to negotiate for it was to resign from his current post in Atlanta. Quitting would have been one thing, as it made sense because he was garbage, but the way he did it was another. Instead of telling his players face to face that he was leaving, Petrino left goodbye notes on all of their lockers. And this was, of course, just 24 hours after he had shook Arthur Blank's hand and assured him he had no plans of leaving. Petrino quickly hopped on a plane and sung the Arkansas fight song while the Falcons watched the press conference on TV. Joey Harrington and lawyer Malloy publicly called him a coward as he braced for all the criticism he would receive. Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer may not have been a coward, but he was a lot of things. Let's just list off some of his incredible accomplishments, sarcasm, in his under one season as head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Signing Tim Tebow to a 1-year, $920,000 deal to play tight end. Breaking practice rules, violating the collective bargaining agreement, releasing Tim Tebow prior to the regular season, telling Vic Fangio that every week in the NFL is like playing Alabama, staying in Ohio after a Thursday night loss to party in a bar with a random young woman on his lap, benching James Robinson, and not knowing that Andre Sisco played 0 snaps in a game. And the nail in the coffin, a video that confirmed an accusation from former Jags kicker Josh Lambo that Meyer had kicked him. And that's not ironic, that's just funny. Meyer was fired with cause after that accusation was proven true, in a stark reminder to Shad Khan that he could make decisions related to the team he owned. Now, that's all a dysfunction, actually not all of it, but we haven't even mentioned how much he sucked as a coach. Meyer was able to make Trevor Lawrence look like a certified bust after his rookie year, and now we all owe Trevor a major apology. And Andre Sisco has quietly turned into one of the league's best young safeties. Meyer won just 2 of his 13 games in Duval and is widely panned as one of the worst head coaches ever in the history of the NFL. Nathaniel Hackett. And finally, the coach whose last name explains the job that he did. Nathaniel Hackett may or may not have been hired as a bargaining chip to lure Aaron Rodgers to Denver. We don't know if that's true, and we may never know, to be honest. We do know, however, that Denver got the short end of the stick when they landed Russell Wilson instead.
Let's ride.
Wilson may be the first quarterback to have already locked up a gold jacket and actively play his way out of it, because his first season in Denver has been a complete disaster class in quarterbacking. Is that due to Nathaniel Hackett, or is Wilson purely washed? Well, Hackett made it very clear in week 1 that he had close to no idea what he was doing, letting the clock run down in Seattle only to attempt a 64-yard field goal that sailed no good, a harbinger of terrible coaching to come. A week later, the Broncos were so disorganized that the fans at Mile High were counting down the play clock to ensure that Denver didn't suffer another delay of game penalty.
With the fans counting down the play clock.
Yeah, they lost that game. Of course, through 15 games, Denver has the worst scoring offense, thoroughly wasting an excellent defense, and scored just 22 touchdowns, an incredible feat in awful play calling. 10 of those touchdowns came after Denver's 9th game, when Hackett ceded play calling duties to Clint Kubiak. Hackett had already delegated game management responsibilities to Jerry Rosberg, the consultant he hired, who's now taken over as the interim head coach. If he wasn't calling plays and he wasn't managing the games, it's fair to ask what the fuck Nathaniel Hackett was doing. By Christmas, Randy Gregory was throwing punches in the post-game handshake line, and Dalton Risner was shoving backup quarterback Brett Rippon. Hackett was not an embarrassment in the way that Urban Meyer or Bobby Petrino disgraced themselves. He was just not ready for the job. And perhaps he never will be. But he did give us an entire season of this.
Let's relive the most embarrassing new worst game ever, starring the Denver Broncos.